Paris, the United Nations is calling a newly released climate report a code red for humanity. The report comes from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it highlights that humans are a driving force in climate change. Additionally, many changes due to past and future greenhouse gas emissions are irreversible for centuries to millennia, especially those of the ocean, ice sheets, and global sea level. Joining us to discuss the effect of climate change on the Midwest and possible solutions are Elena Grossman, the program director at Building Resilience Against Climate Effects, or BRACE, with the University of Illinois Chicago, and Illinois state climatologist Trent Ford, based at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Thanks to you both for joining us. Trent Ford, let's start with you, please. This report makes it clear that humans are at fault for climate change. Why is that so important?
Well, it really was said with honestly the most confidence that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has ever stated that in any of their previous 5 reports. And it wasn't that the IPCC just got more brash all of a sudden. It was because the science that has been building over the last 10 years since the AR5, the previous report, has just continued to pile on the evidence that human-induced increases in carbon dioxide concentrations, among other greenhouse gases and changes in land cover, are the primary cause of the increase in global average temperatures that we've seen over the last 100 to 150 years.
To that end, Trent, you just mentioned the IPCC has released 5 previous reports of this nature, sounding the same alarm for years. How did we get here? Why are we still here?
That's a good question. In the early stages, a lot of it had to do with the fact that there was a lot of uncertainty in the science. When you're imagining a climate changing, like for example, temperature trending upward in time, you have to decompose the variability, because we have year-to-year variability, day-to-day variability in weather, for example. And so it takes a while to start seeing that trend. With that being said, there was really the first few reports, especially the warnings that if these projections are true, this has really dire consequences for humanity, and a lot of those really fell on deaf ears for the first few reports. And so, really reading this report today, especially the summary for policymakers, it was the first time that the report really felt like it was writing about something that is actually occurring, as opposed to maybe being a little prophetic as it was the first few reports. And so in this case, it really felt like it was describing something that we're living through now, which indeed we are.
That we're witnessing. Yeah. Elena Grossman, from a public health standpoint, what was alarming to you about this report?
I think the part of the report that really stood out to me related to public health is that it's even clearer that extreme weather events like heat waves, floods, and droughts are happening more and are more intense because of human-induced climate change. And not just these single events, but these compound events like heat waves and droughts happening at the same time. Heat waves, floods, droughts, they all have a huge impact on our health. If we look back to the 1995 Chicago heat wave, over 700 people died. That's still the most fatal heat wave in history in the United States. But just this past summer, over 200 people died in Oregon and Washington during that heat wave. Floods have multiple impacts on our health, ranging from injuries and deaths to respiratory health problems from mold to mental health challenges from rebuilding and just being exposed to a traumatic event. And really the emphasis on these compound events, and these compound events, they're not necessarily just climatic, but they can also include infrastructure. So for example, there might be a heat wave where the electrical grid is so overwhelmed that there are rolling brownouts or blackouts, and then people don't have access to air conditioning, which can be life-threatening. And while air conditioning is a cause or can contribute to climate change, it also protects our health. And then in the same vein, when you think about floods, it can also knock out electricity. And for both of these events, this is particularly worrisome for those who are medically vulnerable and whose health relies on power, essentially.
And Elena, you mentioned, heat waves. The report cited heat wave peaks. During the 1850s through 1900, they'd only happen once. Now they are likely to occur about 5 times. In about a decade, they predict the world will be 0.7 degrees hotter and there will be about 9 heat wave peaks. Trent, what is the danger in these the rising number of extreme heat waves?
Yeah, well, with vulnerability of both urban and rural areas of all places around the globe, but we can just focus here on Illinois, where we have neighborhoods in Chicago, for example, that are much more vulnerable to extreme heat because of lack of access to cooling centers, green space that can provide shade, air conditioning, as Elena mentioned, and even rural areas where, for example, folks are much larger geographic distances away from healthcare facilities and tend to spend a longer amount of time outdoors. You think about farm workers, for example, in parts of central and southern Illinois. So, an increase in the exposure rate of extreme heat, which is what we're talking about with climate change, without a subsequent or a coincident decrease in vulnerability that can be built into the system, is just going to increase public health outcomes, negative public health outcomes from that. Now, the second side of the equation, the vulnerability, is not only induced from the climate, but also from our social systems. So we can not only mitigate climate change, but adapt to the changing in extreme heat, for example, or any other hazards, to reduce the overall vulnerability of citizens here in Illinois and in Chicago.
Elena, the report didn't focus much on race or equity, of course, focusing mostly on the science. But studies have shown that Black and brown communities will be hardest hit by climate change. Why is that?
Well, I think we look at historical and institutionalized racism, where there are different aspects to where these communities are living and how these communities have been invested in. And so you see Black and brown communities and low-income communities with higher percentages of impervious pavement. So that can increase your vulnerability to both heat and flooding, because for heat, it just reflects back, right? And there's nowhere for the heat to go. And the same for flooding. Green spaces, trees, shrubbery, grasses, all of those can help absorb rainwater. So you have how these neighborhoods have been developed, and where these neighborhoods have been developed increases their susceptibility. In addition to that, a number of these communities are along the trail of trucks and diesel fueled transportation, which not only, climate change is already worsening air quality, and that just contributes to the poor air quality. And so you have a number of these factors that increases their susceptibility to the health impacts from climate change.
And before I let you go, Trent, we've got just a few seconds, but the rising temps, how will they affect Chicago and the Midwest?
When you think about summertime, we talk about the extreme heat, but a lot of folks focus away from winter. Warmer winters may sound good when you're in Chicago, but what it does, it makes Chicago a more conducive environment for vectors for disease such as ticks and mosquitoes, more conducive environment for invasive species, for aquatic ecosystems like Lake Michigan, which is so important, and decreases lake ice extent on Lake Michigan, which makes for a higher likelihood of storm surge with winter storms. So winter temperatures, both in summer and winter, really do provide a lot of negative impacts for Chicago.
A scary report and a lot to be done, it sounds like. For now, we'll have to leave it there. My thanks to Elena Grossman and Trent Ford for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And check out our website for 10 takeaways from the International Climate Change Report. That's WTTW.com/news.